In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, I hope you all are fine and doing very well. Neurons can be divided into different classifications based on different aspects. And one aspect is the shape of the pericardium. Based on this aspect, we can divide the neurons into three types: unipolar, bipolar, and multipolar neurons. The majority of the neurons in CNS are multipolar neurons, and this means that from the different angles of the soma, the extensions arises, the dendrites and axon. So the soma has several poles or several angles. Therefore, this type of neuron is called multipolar neuron. It's another type of in another type of neurons that is called bipolar neuron. As its name indicates, we have two poles in a neuron. From one pole, the dendrite arises, and from another pole, axon arises. And this type of neurons are typically found in the epithelial of the spatial senses. For example, in the epithelial cells of olfaction, or the cells are the epithelium that is dedicated to smelling. So this is the first neuron of this system, and this is called and this is a bipolar neuron. So as you can see here with more magnification, these extensions are dendrites, and this is the cell body, and this is axon of this bipolar neuron. Another example is the retina, and you can see here the bipolar neurons layer of the retina. And another type of neurons are unipolar neurons, and this means that just from one side of the neuron, a short extension arises, and this short extension divides finally into two long extension, and both of these two long extensions are axons because they have the structures of axon. They are myelinated. Okay, so we have a peripheral axon and a central axon. This peripheral axon goes toward the periphery, for example the skin, and this central axon goes toward the central nervous system. And a collection of these cell bodies make the dorsal root ganglion here, or DRG in brief, that is related to the spinal nerves or cranial nerves. So these two types are merely or just sensory neurons, and this type is very common in central nervous system, and can be related to ascending or sensory pathway, or descending or motor pathway. You will get familiar with these terms in near future years. Don't worry. Okay, so with respect of the length of the axon, axons are divided into two parts, Golgi type 1 and Golgi type 2. Golgi type 1 are the neurons that have a long axon, very long, and Golgi type 2 are axons that have the neurons that have very short axons. And you can see here both types. These axons, or the axons of Golgi type 1 neurons. These axons are long, very long, and these neurons are Golgi type 2 neurons, and because their axons are very, very short, and mainly the type of other neurons are between these two, very long or very short. And the very short neurons or axons, or Golgi type 2 axons, are commonly and numerously can be seen in the cortex of cerebrum and cerebellum. Okay. Another classification is based on the function of the neurons. So the neurons that convey the electrical impulses from the periphery toward the central nervous system are called afferent neuron or sensory neurons. And neurons that convey the electrical impulses from the central nervous system toward the periphery are called efferent neurons or motor neurons. So afferent neurons are sensory and efferent neurons are motor. According to the area of innervation, we have 4 types of neurons: somatic sensory, somatic motor, visceral sensory, and visceral motor. So this neuron is somatic sensory, or somatic afferent. Afferent because this impulse, this neuron is conveying electrical impulses from the skin of the, for example here, the index finger toward the central nervous system. The type of neuron, as you can see here, is unipolar, and this neuron is somatic because the neuron reaches to the skin, not the viscera. Okay, so this is afferent because it's going toward the central nervous system, and is somatic because this neuron is not visceral, just as simply as this. Okay, and this neuron is conveying the electrical impulses toward the muscle. So this is efferent, this is motor neuron, but this is somatic neuron or somatic efferent because this neuron is somatic because is conveying the electrical impulses to a voluntary or striated muscle, not a smooth muscle. Okay, and this neuron is a sensory neuron, or it can be motor neuron, because is conveying the electrical impulses toward the muscle of the viscera. Okay, a smooth muscle of the viscera and the cells of the gland. So the type of this neuron is visceral motor or visceral efferent. And we have another type of neurons that is visceral afferent. And this visceral afferent didn't depict it here, but I can show the pathway of this neuron. For example, the sense of the pressure in the stomach can convey toward the central nervous system by visceral afferent neuron, okay, or visceral sensory neuron, because this neuron is conveying the a sense, for example, mechanical sense of viscera toward the nervous system is a visceral neuron. And because this neuron is the electrical impulses along this neuron is going toward the central nervous system, so this neuron is afferent, so visceral afferent. So therefore again, somatic afferent, somatic efferent, visceral efferent or motor, and this neuron that is not depicted here, but you can imaginary depict here for you, is visceral afferent or visceral sensory. Okay, so another aspect of classification of neurons are based on the diameter and the velocity of diameter of the axon and the velocity or speed of the conduction of the electrical impulses. So there are three types of neuron based of this classification: type A, type B, and type C. The type A neurons or have the thickest or widest axon, and also they have the thickest or widest myelin sheet. So they are the fastest or most rapid neurons in the nervous system. And these neurons also, this type of neurons also can be divided itself into three types: A alpha, or four types: A alpha, A beta, not written here, A gamma, and A delta. All A type are fast, but from above toward to below. I mean, A is faster than AB, and AB is faster than AG, and AG is faster than AD. But AD is still faster than B-type neurons. And B-type neurons are thinner compared to type A, but still are faster compared to the type C neurons. And we can find these neurons in perisynaptic neurons. I mean, in autonomic nervous system. Okay, in autonomic nervous system, you can imagine that we have ganglia. This ganglia have one neuron that terminate in this ganglia, and one neuron that start from this ganglia. Or ganglion. The neuron that terminates in this ganglion is called perisynaptic, and the neuron that start from this ganglion is called postsynaptic. So perisynaptic neurons are type B neurons with respect to the velocity and or speed of the transport of the electrical impulses. Okay, and types also we can sensory and motor neurons of these types. Okay, so this is not just the perisynaptic neurons in this type, but we have also motor and sensory neurons in this category. And type C neurons are the neurons that don't have myelin sheath around the axon. So as you can see in future, the velocity or speed of electrical impulse conduction alongside the axon depends on the myelin sheath. So if the neuron doesn't myelin sheath at all, it means that the velocity or the speed of conduction of the electrical impulse alongside the neuron is much lower than the types or slower than the type B and A that has myelin sheath around themselves. And one example of these, one typical example of these type C neurons are the neurons that are postsynaptic. So postsynaptic neurons are mainly of type of C neurons. Also, we can see pain neurons, the sensory neurons that transmit pain, but the type of pain that these neurons convey is different than the type of pain that the sensory neurons in these two types conduct. And you can guess that the conduction here is much slower. So here we have the sharp pain, we interpret the sharp pains, but here with type C neurons we interpret the sharp pain, the obscure pain, not sharp. Okay, and the nerve fibers are the axon of usually the axon of fibers are also called nerve fibers. Okay, so the collection of nerve fibers or the collection of axons in the central nervous system is called tract. Okay, but the collection of the axons or nerve fibers outside the central nervous system, or in PNS, peripheral nervous system, is called nerves. Okay, so cranial nerves and spinal nerves. But in CNS, these collections are called tracts. So in CNS, we don't have nerves, we have tracts. Okay, so this is a fiber or axon, and you can see the segments of myelin sheet around the axon, and I will talk about the myelin and myelination in future for you. Okay, one axon, you can see one axon here and the myelin sheet around the axon. Still, this axon and myelin sheet is surrounded by a connective tissue. I am talking about the peripheral nervous system, dears. Okay, so notice that I am talking in this slide. I am talking about the peripheral nervous system. In central nervous system, we don't have any connective tissue, but in peripheral nervous system, there is a connective tissue around the axon and myelin sheet, and this connective tissue is called endoneurium, and a collection of endoneuriums themselves form a fascicle, and this fascicle is, or fasciculus, is surrounded by another connective tissue, but this connective tissue is thicker than this connective tissue. Okay, so this connective tissue is called perineurium. Okay, so a collection of perineuriums themselves are surrounded by much thicker connective tissue that is called epineurium. So when the nerves are exposed, for example, in dissection, in cadaver, or in surgery, the thing that you can see or is visible for you is the epineurium. Okay, and the epineurium has itself some amounts of fat itself. And this fat has a role of cushion for the nerve. So in bedridden patients, the bedridden means the patients that are in sleep position for long time. The pressure of the body on this cushion, fat cushion, make the cushion be disappeared, and therefore the pressure is directly on the nerves without that their fat cushion is impaired. Okay, so the nerve receive a direct pressure, and this direct pressure gradually impair the nerve itself. Okay, so because of this, in bedridden patients, gradually the function of motor neurons or sensor neurons is going to be disappeared. Okay, or impaired. Disappeared or impaired. And there is a term that is called axoplasmic flow. Consider one axon, and inside the axon there is a cytoplasm. This cytoplasm is called exoplasm because it's dedicated to axon. So exoplasm. And exoplasm has a flow inside inside the axon. So this flow, there is a transport by this flow. This flow make a transport during the axon, and this transport can be toward the cell body. Sorry. Okay, toward the cell body or away from the cell body. You can see, I think, also here. Yes, toward the cell body or away from the cell body. The transport away from the cell body and toward the terminal bottoms is called the anterograde transport. And antero means forward. So anterograde, and retrograde is transport or exoplasmic flow toward the cell body. So the transportation toward the cell body is called retrograde, and as you know, retro means back. So back toward the cell body. So this axonal transport can be fast or slow. A slow transport is always one directional. Okay, sorry. Yes, a slow transport is always one directional and away from the cell body. But fast or rapid transport or rapid transportation is bidirectional, can be toward the cell body or away from the cell body. In some pathogens, or for example, the virus of rabies, the virus that causes the rabies, and you know rabies, the disease that is caused by the bite of the animals, for example, dog or monkey or other mammals. This reverse exoplasmic flow, toward the cell body, make the okay, consider that a rabid dog, it means the dog that has the rabies bite a human. So at the site of the bites of the dog, the peripheral neurons convey this virus toward receive this virus and convey these viruses toward the cell body. So in this way, in this reverse transport or retrograde transportation, the viruses can attack the nervous system and make the rabies in human. Okay. And also in, for example, in poliomyelitis, you know poliomyelitis. Poliomyelitis virus transport from the gastrointestinal system by oral. In chewing the food. By chewing the food, viruses get to the body, inside the body, and when they reach the gastrointestinal system, they can transport from the end of the axons. Can you guess which type of axons? Yes, the visceral axons, because we are talking about gastrointestinal system. So the visceral axons, visceral neurons, convey these viruses again toward the cell body and toward the nervous system as a whole. Also, there is another interesting type of the transportation of the viruses in nervous system, and this is interesting because in two era or two period of life of human life, these viruses, the chickenpox viruses that make the blisters on the skin of the kids, can convey or be transported by the sensory neurons toward the central nervous system, and these viruses stay and live in dorsal root ganglion. You already know dorsal root ganglion, and dorsal root ganglion is a collection of unipolar cells inside the vertebral column, but these dorsal root ganglion and these neurons are actually subclassified as peripheral nervous system. Okay, so these viruses stay here and are dormant during their life, but in adulthood, in some unknown reasons, these viruses will be activated, and now they transport in anterograde manner and goes toward the skin that in the childhood they originated from. Okay, so in adulthood they are activated and goes toward this skin, and make the blisters here. And at adulthood, this disease is called zona or shingle, and they make the area very painful, and aside from some symptoms that more or less can last for days or weeks, this disease is self-limited, can be self-limited. I mean that it doesn't take much time, and can be limited after days or weeks, and consumption of drugs, antiviral drugs, can decrease the pain and other symptoms, and help the disease disappear more sooner, I mean. Okay, dears, I think for this session is enough. In this session you get familiar with the type of neurons and classification of neurons, and the axonal transport. I will continue the next lecture with neuroglia, the type of neuroglia, and some other remained aspects of the neurons. Thank you very much, dear.